Hi, this is Ed. Welcome to the Outer Light channel. Well, before I go on, I just want to thank my patrons at patreon.com/theouterdark. And of course, I'm over at steemit.com/theouterlight. Well, a bit of a different kind of video today. I really want to go into something which I've always found interesting. For those that don't know, in my continuous study about the world that we live in, I've been doing a lot of reading about these hypnosis techniques and how they're used, suggestion, ads, manipulation, all these kinds of things. And then my friend told me a little while back, I always had it in the back of my head, about some insider information to it, how at the echelons in regards of these tech industries, how they think. This person was a contractor, and this doesn't go down to the coders or something that carry out these things, even people in QA and all these kinds of things. This is really a reason why things are done at a very high level and then sent down the chain. This is called something called is derived from something called disrupt and then reframe. So disrupt and then reframe is actually used in sales, okay, and is a very important technique. So what it revolves around, and why this refers to the tech industry, and I'll show you why, is when someone makes a sales pitch to you and it's very confusing. Now this is what they call it, but the underlying principles on this are known in the occult and in mind control and in hypnosis, suggestion, all these kinds of things really stem from the same thing. This is where someone makes a sales pitch to you and you're slightly confused about it. You can't understand what are they talking about. And then what they do is they reframe it in a very clear way with a direct message. And what they've found is this increases sales, that you have more chance of selling something to someone if at first you confuse them and then you tell them directly. In suggestion, this is known as a confusion and then a command. Now this is very old. This is the kind of stuff that comes out of, the fools in medieval times, it's known, and these kinds of things. Very old techniques that are now written in marketing terms. What I mean by this is most people don't know. This is from the occult itself. But the fool, and this is going to be quite a in-depth video because I'm going to go to, it's going to make sense in a minute, I'll go to it. But the fool itself, the reason why in the occult the fool is looked at as someone with great knowledge is because what happened in medieval times in a historical context, the fools and court gestures, and why it's referred to in the cult as letting go of the ego and things like that, and the fool is synonymous with that. There's books written about the fool, is because the fool was usually naked from the waist down. Okay, so they let go of their ego in the most purest way, according to the occult. Of course, this isn't something I subscribe to, I'm just telling you this. And they were naked from the waist down, and what it meant is they had no shame anymore. And they had given up their shame and their ego in order to acquire higher standards of knowledge. And a lot of these things were to do with, simple magical tricks, like balls and whatever, right? You get the picture. They're there to perform in front of the king, but they let go of their ego in order to go on a journey of more esoteric knowledge forms. Now, this relates to the occult, which is synonymous with mind control and manipulation. I won't go too far into that. What I'm going to do is just look back at this disrupt and then reframe. So disrupt and then reframe, or DTR, is a simple technique, and it is derived from hypnosis and things like that, right? So when someone comes and shakes your hand, where you see Darren Brown, the famous hypnotist or mentalist, he'll shake your hand, and everyone expects in their mind for a handshake to go a normal way, but Darren Brown might push into you and then put a hand on your shoulder, and it's a disruption over a normal movement, and for that second your mind is highly suggestible. So when he goes sleep and inserts it straight in there, and a certain percentage of people go into a very high suggestive state and will respond to that command, because you're taking something where, okay, he's shaking my hand, that's normal, and then there's a complete disruption of what a normal handshake is, and he tells you to sleep. It's similar to this. Disrupt and then reframe. which is the argument there, which is what's been projected there as a normal sales pitch that's really abstract and you can't understand it. Then they put the command into you with a simple sales pitch and you buy the product. And this is shown to have very powerful ways of increasing sales. The single most effective method of influencing people fast. This is Psych blog, of course, it's referring to. Works like magic, a little known influence technique that outguns the unusual suspects. It's called, down here, disrupt then reframe. Technique is for you. A word of warning though. The disrupt and then reframe technique is more of a cheap but very effective trick which some might find morally questionable. So why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because this is used, according to inside information I have from a friend of a friend. This happens to everybody, and the reason why this happens to everyone is this reason. Why do you think that when you're using Google, Facebook, or Netflix, or whatever it is, why do you think they continually update and change the layout? And this is coming directly, I'm referring directly to this from inside information. Why do you think that is? Well, my friend knows someone who's a contractor who comes in and does that. At the right at the top there. Not the coders, not the QA, none of those people are aware of that. QA, for instance, right at the top says, we've got to change the layout. Well, why do we change the layout? Well, we just need to change the layout. They don't know. The reason why they change the layout is because it's exactly the same. It's reframe. It's like, it's this kind of methodology, disrupt and then reframe. What it is when you're changing the layout of Facebook, and I'll just use Facebook or Google or Netflix, you can use any of them. Someone comes back, logs into their account, they go, why did they change the layout again? Why did they do that? I don't know where the button is to check the privacy. I don't know where the button is to do this. I don't know where the button is to do this. They've changed it. And you go, why did they change it? It was good the way it was. I could use it. Well, you're not thinking about it in these kind of psychological kind of terms, these very nefarious terms. It's disrupt and then reframe. You see, when someone's confused, just like with the handshake or just coming out of that psychological blog there, when you make the confusing statement and then sell it to them clearly, they're more likely to buy the product. If you have a layout that's using the disrupt and then reframe technique, people are confused, they're in a state of confusion. Why did they change the layout? They're upset. But they're more likely to buy the ads and the products advertised on there. That's why they do it. That's the real reason why they do it. And when my friend, who's extremely honest and has integrity, told me that their contractor, that's what they were doing, and that's why they changed the layout, it clicked in my mind, you see, because I knew about these techniques from my study into these techniques about the tools being used against us, against humanity. And I was like, well, that's why they do it. Yeah, it makes sense with the knowledge that I know in this area, as well as how they lay out. And she said directly, they do it to sell more products because when people are confused, they buy more. And that's why they change the layout. That's why they're always updating the layout. That's why Google changes the layout. That's why Netflix changes the layout. That's why when you're just used to using a system, the layout changes. And I would be willing to suspect that the layout, and sometimes where they only roll it out to some people, the layout only changes for people that have become used to it. Then the layout just changes just for them. We're still updating the layout and seeing how people feel about it. Well, they only change the layout to mass groups of some people based on usability statistics, so they can get the maximized results from that, whereas those people are going to be the most confused, whereas other people who are just introduced to that layout, are not going to be, it's not going to be beneficial to change that layout for them until they're used to it. That's when you change it. So just a little secret there from the ether. And when you see that, you're just like, wow. So that's the world we live in. Yes, it's the world we live in. That's the real world. That's why 9/11 works. Okay? That's problem, reaction, solution is a different methodology. Works on the same principles. That's confusion, shock, and then influence. Okay? 9/11 happens. Everyone's in shock. Come out and say, it was done by Iraq. Let's roll. And everyone says, it was done by Iraq. Let's roll. They're just very palatable. It's a high-end example of it. But it's used really, you can see it in the layouts of every web page. At least these big companies that run from these think tanks of this methodology, well known, called disrupt and then reframe. It's an argument methodology. It's employed in a visual context and to do with website layouts. Why did they change where the button is to log in? I don't know how to use it anymore. How do I get back to my profile? Why is the privacy button not there anymore? Well, now you know. Disrupt and then reframe. Any site using that technology and using these mental tools in order to manipulate people to buy more products, you might not want to use those sites. But then, of course, if you look back at Facebook, we conducted a study here on 689,000 users back in 2012, but reported here in 2014, who were actively showing negative news feeds, to their base. Hundreds of thousands of people were showing negative news, and they didn't feel very good about it. But Facebook did it anyway because it was just a little experiment they were doing with emotions. But it's everywhere. It's Netflix, it's everywhere, facial recognition. It's all about emotions, you see. They all want to know how to manipulate your mind. That's where facial recognition is going. That's why Facebook's focus, Google's focus, all of them are on facial recognition to build emotional and psychological profiles in order to institute stronger methods of control. You might think that's crazy. Well, no, there's economic reasons for it as well. Of course, those data profiles could be used in the future for employment analyses. How many times was Jerry and Jane sad last year when they were working at that last company? Well, I've got an a psychological profile, an emotional profile here. Say 66% of the time they weren't smiling in photos, crunched that data to reflect whatever, and they were showing X of experimental posts that exposed them to happy information or whatever, but they didn't smile. Therefore, the chances of them being whatever is X.X or whatever. The big data set really on the emotional profile, the suggestibility that can measure suggestibility, emotional profile, all these different mechanisms. Meanwhile, at the same time, they can experiment all they want. And if they ever want to drive up ad revenue if they're having a bad day, well, they could always update the profile, the layout. No one will understand it, and of course those ads, are much more persuasive in those aspects. And these are the people, really. We're all guinea pigs in Google's search experiment. Of course you are. All these big tech firms, they're everyone's hero today, aren't they? I mean, you go out and everyone's like, wow, he works at Google, he works at Facebook, amazing. Not saying everyone at Google and Facebook even knows about this kind of stuff. I would say it would be like nearly everybody. The entire sea of people that work at Google and Facebook really don't know nothing about this kind of thing. They just think they're updating the profile. They just think, oh, it's the new layout. Got to update the layout, send it to the coders, send it to QA, get them all on board, let's have another meeting, we need the layout by X amount, let's make some deadlines. They don't know. But that's the reason they do it, and that's for some inside information. You'd be amazed, but I do know some people in different areas. I'm not saying I know anyone, but I just know a few people, that's all. And that's the reason why they do it. Update it, change it. Netflix has to change their layout. Of course, it's not going to be the same next year or whatever. Now, you might think, how does Netflix sell products? Well, it's not about that. It's about them clicking on more movies, being more engaged with the content, watching more Netflix, although they don't know why. Or maybe it's because they just changed the layout and people were just confused, so they're feeling in a deep part of their subconscious mind, okay, I'm confused, just like someone back in evolutionary time, back in the ancient past. I don't know this environment. It's important for me to know this environment because of survival. Therefore, I've got to spend more time in it now. Confused about Netflix, I've got to spend more time watching the TV programs to understand what's happening. Subconsciously, deep down. You see, that's the way it always was. And I remember Mark Piasso gave a good example of the dark occult. I'll tell you a story. He was trying to explain the occult, okay? And he was saying it boiled down to this interesting thing. So this was the occult in a nutshell. The difference between, the occult really is the same thing when I looked at it. I mean, it comes down to this. They were trying to sell, and you would be surprised how the same the dark occult and the occult methodologies are with advertising. They actually have foundative principles, far more advanced in the dark occult than they are in advertising. But, they're the same principles. It's a different field of research that goes back for eons. But look at this. Someone was trying to sell this homemade, packet of mix. This goes back a while, back to, I guess, probably the nuclear family, so 1950s, 60s or whatever. There was this packet mix. Okay, and there was had this, complete cake in it. You could just, all you had to do was add water and you've got a cake. Okay, and it wasn't selling very well. Okay, it wasn't selling very well at all. And so people are looking at it going, why isn't this selling well? This is a really great thing. Back in these days, a lot of women were cooking, this is 1950s, of course. And they had these packets of cake mix. Why is it selling well? All you have to do is add water. Even a guy can just add water if he wants to make a cake or something, and and then you've got a cake. You just mix it up. Well, the problem was they weren't thinking about it in these occult terms. You see, so they asked the specialist, and the specialist goes in and recommends one thing. He goes, add an egg. Do not add the egg to the mix. Say, all you have to do is add an egg. Okay, before the egg was already in there, probably in a powdered form or whatever. But instead of adding the egg to the mix, you tell them they have to add an egg to make the cake. And so they did that, and it sold, literally, pun intended, it sold like hotcakes. Just went out there, everyone was buying it. The reason why is because that gave the individual, the woman, the ability to add a part, herself, do something for herself to add to that cake to make that cake happen. Now you can go back to the sacred feminine, the idea of the egg and the woman, and these relationships within the psychology of individuals and their relation to giving something to the product. But that would be an occult perspective on the same solution. You can apply to it in psychological terms. But it enabled them to add something to the mix to create something. And that really is the dark occult. And that's what you see here. You see, when people are disrupted, when people are confused about something, then all you do is reframe it and tell them it to them again, and they're highly influenced by it. And it's a sales technique which is famous, but it's really kind of like just a way of explaining really the overall technique, which is when people are confused, they're highly susceptible to suggestion. That's why Hitler, the great occultist, held his rallies in the twilight hours when everyone was tired, because they're easily manipulated. Okay, Hitler, the famous, he's literally an occultist. Okay, Hitler. But throughout the times, this is a method of confusion, manipulation. So high confusion is really the desire of all the tech companies, of everybody. The media, everything wants to make everyone confused. That's really what it boils down to. If the methodology works so well and has been used at the echelons of power, then really you can only expect, if you scroll back and think, well, what's it going to look like in a few years? Well, they'll want to project a projected idea of confusion within the public because it creates easier manipulation. So, thought I'd just tell you that, in case anybody was interested in that. Of course, beyond facial recognition experiments and all these kinds of things. Facebook reveals feed experiments to control emotions. And all these things they do really all comes back to the same thing. Facebook, sorry, almost for secret psychological experiment on users. It's all the time. Right, left paradigm, all of it. Usually has one outline to all these kinds of things. There's Zuck's philosophy. What? How did you manage that one? He's got 400 emails, even got social security numbers there Zuck's talking about. People just submitted it. I don't know why they trust me, dumb Fs. Yes, it's all trusting the magicians here. Embarrassing and damaging Zuckerberg IMs confirmed by Zuckerberg, the New Yorker. Reported here by Business Insider. These are the people you're dealing with. Really, a lot of people don't believe that these techniques are being used, but in my research they're absolutely being used, and by the testimony of my friend who knows someone at these echelons that comes in as a specialist and really kind of, says it like it is. Well, they adjust the web pages, they're perpetually changing the layouts because it makes more people more susceptible to advertising. Classic. Classic there from the old ether. In the meantime, though, go out and do your own research. Of course, decide for yourselves what to believe. Go out and decide for yourselves what to believe. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think it's all innocent. Whatever you decide, of course, it's fine with me. In the meantime, this is Ed from the Our Light. Stay safe, and I'll see you all later.